Good day, everyone. I'd like to quickly introduce myself. I am Lizelle Mabisa, and my topic is all about subject cataloging. As you can remember, there are two types of cataloging, the descriptive and the subject cataloging. Descriptive cataloging is the extraction of bibliographic elements such as the author names, the title, the publisher, the date of publication, and etc. from each item, while the subject cataloging is the assignment of subject categories or the headings to such items. First, we'll look at some of the key dates in the origin of the Library of Congress subject headings. Library of Congress subject headings, or the LCSH, is an accumulation of the subject headings that have been established at the Library of Congress since 1898 and used in its cataloging. Since 1988, other libraries have contributed subject headings to Library of Congress subject headings as well. So in 1869, the Catalog of Library of Congress and the Index of Subjects. This was a two-volume alphabetical classified subject index to works held by the Library of Congress. Subjects were grouped in broad classes with numerous alphabetic subdivisions. In 1898, after the Library of Congress moved into its new Capitol Hill building, it decided to switch to a dictionary catalog. Headings were based on the 1895 edition and the American Library Association work list of subject headings for use in dictionary catalogs. So for their background, dictionary catalogs were coming into vogue at this time, and the Library of Congress was also moving toward the development of its own classification system, as the classification system developed by Thomas Jefferson was no longer adequate. And in 1902, the Library of Congress began distributing catalog cards. Now we'll highlight a few key dates in the recent history of the Library of Congress, beginning with 1975, when the title changed to Library of Congress subject headings. At this time, the full-fledged free-floating subdivision system was introduced. And in 1982 to 1984, this two-year period marked the beginning of opportunities for catalogers outside the Library of Congress to gain the greater understanding of Library of Congress subject cataloging practices and even to participate in the development of Library of Congress subject headings. The American Library Association sponsored the regional institutes on the Library of Congress subject headings were the first widespread training outside of the Library of Congress. Next is in 1986, the Library of Congress subject headings converted to machine-readable form, and the weekly tape distribution service of subject authority records begin. And 1991, Airlie House Subdivisions Conference convened. Based on the Airlie House recommendations, the effort to standardize and simplify the system of subdivisions used in the Library of Congress subject headings have occurred since the conference. And in 1995, the Subject Authority Cooperative Program, or the SACO, formed. SACO is a component of the program for cooperative cataloging, or the PCC. Today, catalogers at more than 100 libraries worldwide submit proposals through SACO. Next, in 1999, this was the implementation of MARC subfield code V for form subdivisions. The LC began a project to create authority records for free-floating subdivisions at this time. That project was completed in December 2002. And in 2002, the launching of Classification Web and the inauguration of Web Authorities. Classification Web is a subscription service offering access to both Library of Congress classification and the Library of Congress classifications system subject head. The Library of Congress subject headings updated weekly. The web authorities also provides free access to Library of Congress authority records for names, subjects, and uniform titles via the web. Now, let us define the subject cataloging. Subject cataloging involves the subject analysis of the resource and providing corresponding subject headings from a controlled vocabulary or the subject heading list, such as the Library of Congress subject headings or the LCSH, the medical subject headings or the MESH, and the assignment of classification numbers using schemes such as the Library of Congress classification or the LCEC or the Dewey Decimal Classification or the DDC. Again, subject cataloging is the phase of the cataloging process which is concerned with determining and describing the intellectual or the artistic content and the genre or the form characteristics of a resource and translating that understanding into subject headings and classification notations. What is subject heading? Subject heading is that specific procedure of cataloging by which the cataloger chooses the appropriate subject heading for the subject discussed in the catalog books. The main objectives of the subject cataloging is to fulfill the subject-related needs of the readers. And the subject headings gives complete indication of the subject covered in the book, including all of its various aspects and forms. Subject heading should be a synonym and indication of the specific subject of a book. There are types of subject headings. Some useful subject heading aspects all over the world, all over words are given below. The source list of subject heading, or the SLSH, the American Library Association list of subject headings for use in dictionary catalogs, the Library of Congress subject headings, or the LCSH. Library of Congress subject heading. The Library of Congress subject headings comprise a thesaurus of subject headings maintained by the United States of Library of Congress for use in bibliographic records. The LCSH are applied to every item within a library collection and to facilitate a user's The Library of Congress subject headings are applied to every item within a library collection and facilitate a user's access to items in the catalog that pertain to similar subject matter. The purpose of the Library of Congress subject headings is providing subject access points to the bibliographic records contained by the Library of Congress catalogs. Library of Congress subject headings is also a tool for subject indexing of library catalogs in general. It has also been used as a tool in a number of online bibliographic databases outside of the Library of Congress. This Library of Congress classification. The Library of Congress classification is a system of library classification developed by the Library of Congress. It was developed in the late 19th and the early 20th centuries to organize and arrange the book collections of Library of Congress. Excuse me. Over the course of the 20th century, the system was adopted for use by other libraries as well, especially the large academic libraries in the United States. It is currently one of the most widely used library classification systems in the world. And there are several classification schemes in use worldwide. Besides the Library of Congress classification, the popular ones among them are the Dewey Decimal Classification, or the DDC, the Universal Decimal Classification, the UDC, and the Bliss Bibliographic Classification, or the BC. Out of this, the DDC and the LCC are the classification systems which are most commonly used in libraries. Basic principles: the user and the usage, the uniform heading, the terminology, the specific direct entry, and the specificity. User and usage. According to Cutter, the most important subject cataloging principle is consideration of the best interest of the catalog user. In the preface to the 4th edition of the rule, Cutter states, "The convenience of the public is always to be set before the ease of the cataloger." And Haken in 1951 echoes Cutter's sentiments about the user and calls this principle the reader as a focus. User and usage. The user and their usual way of looking or searching for information should be determined, since they are important in determining the terms and forms of subject headings to be used. Example: birds instead of ornithology. So instead of ornithology, you use the bird as the subject headings. For the uniform heading, each subject should be represented in the catalog under only one heading and under only one form and format. So the synonymous terms, the variant spelling, the foreign terms versus the local terms, the technical versus the popular terms, and the obsolete versus the current terms. So the choice of among synonymous terms, the adventure fiction used for adventure and adventurous, thus fiction, or the adventurous stories, or the suspense novels. So instead of using adventure and adventurous fiction, adventure stories, and the suspense novels, you use adventure fiction. Next is the choice among variant spelling. So instead of aesthetics like this, you use the aesthetics, this spelling. Instead of archaeology, you use archaeology, this one. Next is the foreign terms versus the local terms. So dongao, you use dongao instead of crying for the dead, and pinakbit instead of vegetable in tomato sauce, and bagnet instead of deep fried pork. So there may be a list of subject headings specific to a country. Example, the Filipiniana subject heading list, which may be used as a source. So for technical versus the popular terms, instead of cryogenics, you use cold temperatures. So instead of gynecology, you use the women-health and hygiene. So for the obsolete versus the current terms, instead of this obsolete one, the computing machine, you use computers. And instead of blocks, you use African American. So next is the terminology. Subject headings function both as the indexing language for library collections and as the retrieval language for users who want material on particular subjects. Ideally, the terminology of system users who are searching for material on a subject should be the same as the vocabulary used to index materials in the collection on this subject. In practice, the terminology is often very different. So when differences can be predicted before retrieval, the catalog can give users direction in the form of C references to establish subject headings. Cutter, Henson, Haken, and other writers provided guidelines for the creation of C references. The C references guide users from terms that are not used to establish subject headings in the LCSH system. Since the publication of the 11th edition of the LCSH, C reference have been given the designation use references. So Chan in 1986 identifies the 9 situations in which the Library of Congress subject headings can be expected to provide the C references. Occasionally, Library of Congress subject headings dispatches a complex C reference to explain the several relationships that exist between the unused term and the established subject headings that cannot be adequately expressed in one or more simple C references. An example is the complex reference, C reference under the unused term, defense budgets. Use the subdivision appropriation and expenditures under the names of individual defense agencies. Example, the United States Department of Defense. Appropriation and expenditures and subdivision armed forces, thus appropriation and expenditures under names of countries. Example, United States, thus unarmed forces, and appropriations and expenditures. A complex C reference is more appropriate than a simple C reference because of the several relationships that exist between main headings, naming defense agencies and countries, and subdivision, appropriation, and expenditures. The specific and direct entry. Cutter's explanation of the rule of the specific entry is enter a work under its subject heading, not under the heading of a class which includes the subject. Put lady cost books in the cut under cat, not zoology or mammals or domestic animals. So in an alphabetical class catalog, the subject heading for Lady Cast's book could be zoology, thus vertebrates, thus mammals, thus domestic animals, thus cats. So this heading is as specific as the subject, as the heading cats for the dictionary catalog. So the difference is the entry element. So in alphabetical class catalog, users have to navigate through the series of increasingly narrower terms to reach the term that describes their topic or interest. So instead of using the subject headings zoology, vertebrates, mammals, domestic animals, and cats, you use the cats. Specificity. Assign headings that are specific as the topics they cover. So in other words, generally don't assign broad, general headings when dealing with the specific aspect of that topic. However, a valid heading that is as specific as the topic is not always available. So try to be as specific as you can while still covering the topic. So groups of subtopics of overarching general topic. So if 3 or fewer subtopics of general topic are discussed. So if the subtopics cumulatively represent the entire topic, there are no significant aspects of the broader topic that are not covered in the work. So assign a heading for the broader topic. Example, book on vertebrate and invertebrate animals. Animals are either vertebrate or invertebrate. So you assign subject as animals, not vertebrates, not invertebrates. Next, if the subtopics cumulatively represent only part of the entire topic, example, there are significant aspects of the broader topic that are not covered in the work. So assign a heading for each of the subtopic. Example, book on mice and rats, both subcategories of rodents. So there are types of rodents other than mice and rats. So you assign mice or you assign rats. So not rodents. Okay? So if more than 3 subtopics of general topic are discussed, assign a heading for the broader topic. So there are occasional exceptions if 4 subtopics of a very broad topic are discussed. Example, book on mice, elephants, bears, and deer. So you assign them as mammals, not the mice, not the elephants, not the bears and the deers. The forms of headings. Single noun headings, example, the essay, the abstract concept, or the essays, the concrete concept. The compound headings, example, the satire and humor. The adjectival headings, the higher example is higher education. Prepositional phrase headings, the electricity in agriculture and the freedom of speech. Next is subdivision. There are four types of subdivision: the topical, the geographic or the place, the chronological and the form, and the free floating or form or topical. Subdivisions and Library of Congress subject headings. Narrow the scope of a heading and bring out the specific aspects of the heading. Now we'll take a look at some of the characteristics of subject headings, subdivisions, in Library of Congress subject headings. Subdivisions can break large heading concepts down into more manageable subunits. Example, a work discussing pre-colonial Brazil needs more than just subject heading Brazil. So in the example, the work about the pre-colonial Brazil would be lost if it had only the main subject heading Brazil. So assigning a more specific subject heading, the Brazil history to 1822. To the work allows it to be collocated with other works about the same time period. So this is also an example of pre-coordination. So the established heading pulls together the various elements rather than having the searcher combine terms that is called post-coordination. Then the subdivisions may be themselves be subdivided. As I've mentioned earlier, there are the types of subdivision: the topical, the geographic or the place. Example of topical is the English language grammar. Geographic or place, flowers, Australia. Chronological period, Philippines history in 1946 to 1971, that is chronological. Chemistry dictionaries, that is form. And the order of subdivisions, the main heading, the topical, the geographic, the chronological, and the form. For topical subdivisions, a topical subdivision is similar to a topical heading. It is used to limit the concept of a heading to a specific subtopic. So many represent actions, attributes, or aspects. So when more than one topical subdivision is used with a main heading, it refines the concept and makes it more specific. Example, helicopter Helicopters flight testing. May Presley Elvis, 1935 to 1977, or sightings, were applicable to numerous headings, psychological aspects, statistical methods. Sometimes used to bring out parts of the whole. Muscles, sports cars / axles. More than one topical subdivision may be used to refine the concept. The fruit post-harvest losses, or the fruit post-harvest losses / prevention. Topical subdivisions are coded X. Next is the geographic subdivision. If a work discusses a topic in regard to a specific location, geographic subdivision may be used to group together the common coverage. So geographic subdivision may represent where something is located or where it is formed depending on the topic. For example, the headings the heading physician subfield code Z, China, is used to represent the concept of physician currently in China or originally from China. Not all headings may be subdivided geographically. So not all headings may be subdivided geographically. Also, some but not all topical subdivision may be subdivided geographically. Next is chronological subdivision. Chronological subdivision are also referred to as a period subdivision. Used for the time period covered in the contents of a work should not confused with the publication date of the work. So usually associated with historical treatment of a topic, printing, history, 19th century, Russia, social conditions 1801 to 1917. In most cases, chronological subdivisions follow the subdivision history. Okay, when a topic is inherently historical, the subdivision is history. History is not used. So when a topic is inherently historical, history is not used. Example of inherently historical topics includes headings for historical time periods, the 1970s Renaissance, or the historical events Iran-Iraq War in 1980, or Russia social conditions 1801 to 1970. And subdivisions such as chronology for economic conditions used with literary, music, and art headings. So German literature, 18th century, sonatas, piano, 20th century. Chronological subdivisions are coded Y. For the form subdivision, indicate what an item is rather than what it is about. And the most common subdivision may be used under all the types of main headings and subdivisions, periodicals, bibliography. So form subdivisions are coded V, or the subfield code V are used and are generally the last subdivision in the heading. So if a work is about a specific form, the form is treated as a topical subdivision. Example, the science, subfield code X, periodical, subfield code V. Bibliography for a bibliography of science periodicals. Occasionally, two subdivisions are needed to indicate form. Technology, bibliography, and periodicals. Subfield called V, bibliography, and subfield code V, periodicals, for a bibliography that is issued as a periodical. For free-floating versus established, some subdivisions can be used with a specified categories of headings whenever they appropriate without having been explicitly established with those headings. Other subdivisions are only to be used in individual cases and must be represented by an authority record permitting the usage. It would not be correct to use the subject heading public libraries, food and beverage policies based on the existence of the authority record academic libraries, food and beverages policies. And the subdivision is not free-floating. It must be established under a heading. Moon exploration. Next, names in subject headings. If the work being cataloged is about a person or a place or a corporate entity, then a name heading is appropriate. So the rules for constructing these headings will depend on the type of name. The personal names, the corporate names, the place and geographic names. A biography will have a subject heading for this biography. Bronte Charlotte, 1816-1855. So in case it comes up, be aware that the headings for a fictitious person are constructed as if they were personal names. Inverted, it must be inverted, first the last name and the first name, but coded as a topical headings. Next is personal name headings are constructed according to AACR 2 and LCRI practice. Family names, the Casper family and the royal houses and dynasties, Plantagenet House of, House of, are coded as personal names, but they are constructed according to subject cataloging rules. Corporate names. Corporate bodies can also be subject of works and as such would receive subject headings. Generally, a corporate body is an organization or a group of persons identified by a particular name. Indigo Girls, the musical group. The corporate names is the Indigo Girls. Next is Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That is corporate names. Certain vessels and vehicles are considered to be a corporate bodies. The Titanic or the steamship. Apollo 13, the spacecraft. Corporate name headings are constructed according to AACR 2 LCRI practice. Geographic names. Headings can be assigned for jurisdictional areas and geographic features. For example, a guidebook about the Albuquerque in New Mexico would be assigned a geographic main heading, Albuquerque, open close parentheses, and .m. So we'll talk about the mark tags for the subject headings later. Next is the Grand Canyon Eyes. If a place name used as a subject has a uniform title or a subordinate body, it is considered a corporate name. Like example, Albuquerque and New Mexico Fire Department. Next